The second I walked into our living room carrying my 4-day-old newborn, my father-in-law pointed at me and snarled, "We are not putting the Harrington last name on a bastard that might not even be my son's." My mother-in-law smiled with pure disgust and said, "Pack your things and get the hell out of our family home. You and that child are no longer welcome." I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I simply handed my husband the hospital envelope I'd been holding. He read one underlined line and his face went pale. Then he slowly turned and stared at his mother, not at me, not at our baby. What they didn't know was that the line he just read had nothing to do with my son. It was about her, and it was going to burn her perfect bloodline to the ground. My name is Rowena Thorne, 32 years old. If you've ever been told you don't belong in the family that was supposed to love you, stay with me. This story is for you. Tap subscribe so the next chapter finds you. I have spent the last 9 years reading medical records for a living. Senior Analyst, Health Information Management, St. Jude's Royal Hospital, London. My desk faces a wall of beige filing cabinets that nobody under 50 seems to notice anymore. I notice them. I notice everything. My father used to say, "Records don't get nervous. People do." He died of pancreatic cancer in late 2018, 6 months before my wedding. I keep a small gray cloth notebook in the inside pocket of my work blazer because it was his, and because he carried it the same way. That notebook would, one day, hold the only sentence I needed to bring an entire family down. But on the morning I'm describing, it was just a notebook. And I was just a woman in a maternity ward nightgown walking past 3 suitcases that did not belong to me. I met Bastian Harrington in the spring of 2017. I was 24, doing an interface audit between St. Jude's Royal and his family's law firm, Harrington, Bletchley & Sterling. He was the junior associate assigned to babysit me through the paperwork. We sat across a glass conference table in Mayfair for 3 afternoons. And on the 3rd afternoon, he asked me a question about a misfiled records request. And I told him the truth instead of the polite version. He looked up. He laughed. He told me later it was the first time he had laughed in that office in 2 years. "You don't talk like a solicitor," he said. "I don't have to lie for a living," I said. I thought it was a joke. He told me much later that his mother had warned him about records women. I thought that was a joke, too. We were married in October 2019 inches, a small Anglican church outside Gloucester, where my mother had grown up. My father had been gone less than a year. My mother walked me down the aisle holding a handkerchief she had embroidered with both of our names. The Harringtons attended. They sat in the 3rd row, and afterward, Genevieve Harrington, my new mother-in-law, hosted what she called a post-wedding garden tea at the estate in Ascot. She handed me a calling card in the receiving line. The card read, Mrs. Barnaby H. Harrington in raised black ink. Her own first name was not on it. I kept it. I did not understand for 6 more years why a woman would erase her own name first. We tried for a baby for 4 years. There were 2 miscarriages neither of his parents knew about because Genevieve had once told us that Harrington men announce only when they are sure. So, we stopped announcing. We stopped telling. In the late summer of 2025, the ultrasound finally showed a heartbeat that did not go quiet a week later. And in December, at 30 weeks, Bastian signed the spousal consent broad release form for my maternity coverage in the same way husbands sign every other unread document, quickly, distractedly, while reading his email. He used a hospital pen with a chewed cap. He kissed the top of my head. He went back to work. That signature would later become the only paper barrier between Bastian and the truth he had never been brave enough to ask about himself. I should have noticed sooner. When a family talks about blood that often, they are usually trying to hide what is inside it. The Harringtons arrived in London in 1889 from a respectable Anglican town in Yorkshire. The law firm opened in 1,952 inches, a townhouse in Mayfair that still smells like wood polish and old men. There is a leather-bound book on the console table in the front hallway of the Ascot estate. It is the Harrington family register. Every Harrington bloodline-verified child has been entered into that book by hand, with a Mont Blanc fountain pen and black ink, since the reign of King George V. Barnaby's father wrote in it. Barnaby's grandfather wrote in it. Barnaby wrote in it the night Bastian was born. He wrote in it again the night Bastian's older brother Tarquin welcomed his first child 4 years ago. He left a blank page after every entry for the next one. Barnaby liked to say that Harrington aged in the chin first. "You can tell at a glance," he would say on Boxing Day, "if a man has the bone for this family." Bastian's chin was nothing like his father's. I had noticed it at our rehearsal dinner. I had said nothing then, and I had said nothing for 6 years afterward because in that family, You did not say small true things out loud. You said large false things, and you said them politely. In December of 2023, the younger cousins handed out DNA testing kits at the Harrington Christmas gathering as a party game. Everyone took one. Barnaby took one. Tarquin took one. Bastian took one. Genevieve, the only person in the room without a kit in her hand, laughed and waved hers away. I already know exactly who I am, sweetheart, she said. I don't need a tube to tell me. The kit she refused disappeared from the front hallway before New Year's Eve. I noticed. I said nothing. A month after my father-in-law's older brother Alistair died of pancreatic cancer in the summer of 2019, Barnaby signed up for the optional hereditary cancer screening add-on through Street, Jude's private healthcare's executive health program. The firm paid for it. He wanted answers about how his brother had died. He wanted to know if the same shadow lived in his own DNA. He got answers about cancer risk. They were unremarkable, and the panel, like all modern hereditary cancer panels, automatically logged a paternal haplogroup signature as background lineage data. He never opened that part of the file. Why would he? He already knew exactly who he was, too. In November of 2025, when I was 8 months pregnant, Genevieve emailed me a document titled Family Standards for Your Year of If I Die or Something. For your awareness. 9 bullet points. No tattoos, no social media announcements of the pregnancy, no public ultrasound pictures. Item 7, underlined in pale blue pencil before she printed and rescanned it, read, Non-paternity events stay inside the family. I read that line 3 times. I filed the email in a folder I called Harrington. That phrase was not the kind of phrase a woman writes by accident. I just didn't know yet whose event she was thinking about. In late January of 2026, Bastian's older brother Tarquin sent a message into the family group chat, the one Genevieve had named the register. Tarquin and his wife Cressida were starting IVF with genetic testing on the embryos. Tarquin, full of new father energy years before the fact, suggested we all add a baseline genomic comparison to the family. It's about time we map this family properly, he wrote. Boss, you should grab one too. Bastian didn't answer right away. He told me later he meant to. He never did. Within an hour of Tarquin's message, Genevieve texted Tarquin privately. The screenshot would come to me much later from one of the 4 cousins who had quietly texted me directly during the worst weeks. Genevieve's text read, Let's not turn this into a circus. Bastian has enough on his plate. At the time I read it as protective. I would learn that she had been protective of herself. I went into labor at 1:0 inches the morning on Thursday, the 12th of February 2026, in a snowstorm that closed half of the M4 motorway and would still be falling when my mother tried to drive down from Gloucester 2 days later. Julian Hugh Thorne Harrington was born by scheduled cesarean at 9:14 inches the morning, 6 pounds, 11 ounces. He had a small whirl of dark hair at the back of his head and a hospital bracelet that read in tidy printed capitals, Baby Thorne Harrington. The nurse let me hold him before they took him to the warmer. He smelled like every newborn I had ever leaned over in 9 years of work. He smelled like a fact that nobody could undo. On Friday, February 13th, the NHS newborn blood spot screening ran on Julian's heel stick blood, 30 disorders plus an automated red blood cell antigen scan. He cleared every disorder. The antigen scan flagged something. Not a disease, not a danger, an incidental finding, a rare blood marker called K0, present in roughly 1 in 7,000 people of Northern European descent. It is inherited paternally through the maternal line, and because it is so rare, it functions in lineage work like a fingerprint. If a baby has it, somebody upstream has it. The lab note in my chart read, in plain text, unusual, not pathogenic. Recommend follow-up with genetics if family history relevant. I sat in my hospital bed at 3:0 inches the afternoon and read that line. I read it 3 times. I called Dr. Rosalind Sterling in the genetics department from my hospital phone. I had worked with her on chart audits for years. She picked up on the second ring. Hi, Rowena. I just saw your delivery in the system. Congratulations. Thank you, I said. I want to file a follow-up request under my own consent, today, if possible. Sterling was quiet for a second, then she said, What kind of follow-up? A lineage match, K null marker, Julian against Bastian. You have spousal consent on file? Signed December 2nd, maternity coverage release. It includes incidental findings comparison. Then yes, I'll walk it down myself. I signed the paperwork at the side of my hospital bed with Julian in the crook of my left arm. I also signed a separate document with the HR director, who came up to my room because she liked me. A formal disclosure that I had a personal conflict of interest in the matter and would not access any record at Street Jude's Royal for the duration of my medical leave. I would not return to work until further notice. The disclosure was timestamped 2:47 inches the afternoon on Saturday, February 14th. The screenshots in the safe would later all be timestamped to the minute. By Sunday morning, the lab had run the K-null marker comparison on Bastian's existing wellness file from the Street Jude's private healthcare system and on Julian's newborn screening sample. They matched. Julian was Bastian's biological son. Bastian was Julian's biological father. The probability of error in that kind of marker match is so small that no court in the country has ever set it aside. Sterling walked into my room on Monday morning before discharge with a manila envelope sealed with red lab tape. She set it on the rolling tray over my legs. She didn't smile because she could read a face faster than anyone I have ever known. "It's clean," she said. "It's him." Underlined the relevant line on page 1. "You hold this." "Thank you, Rosalind." "Rowena, whatever you need. I'm a phone call away." I packed Julian into the car seat at noon. Bastian pulled up at the discharge curb in his gray saloon car. He looked at me the way a man looks at a stranger who has been assigned to him. He had been distant for 2 days. He had been on the phone with his mother twice on Saturday night. I did not ask him about either of those phone calls. I tucked Julian into the back. I sat in the front. The envelope went into my handbag, tucked between a pack of breast pads and my father's old gray notebook. The discharge nurse pushed me out to the curb in a wheelchair. As she let me up, she said, almost casually, "Whoever's waiting at home, ask them to take everything off the floor. You don't want to trip in the first week." I would think about that sentence for the rest of my life. There was, in fact, something on the floor of my living room when I walked through the door an hour later. 3 of them. Lined up perfectly. We lived in a Victorian townhouse on the Richmond side of the river. Barnaby and Genevieve had a key to that townhouse because in early December at our baby shower, Genevieve had asked Bastian for one to help set up the nursery. He had given it to her without thinking, the way he gave her almost everything without thinking. The second I walked into our living room carrying my 4-day-old newborn, my father-in-law pointed at me and said the words I will quote for the rest of my life. My mother-in-law with hers. There were 3 leather suitcases lined up against the wall of the front hallway. The luggage tags read, in Genevieve's left-leaning handwriting, R. Thorne. Not Harrington. She had used my maiden name. She had used it on purpose. I will tell you what surprised me most in that moment, and it was not the suitcases. It was that Barnaby had a sheet of folded paper in his right hand. It was a memorandum, printed on Harrington, Bletchley, and Sterling firm letterhead, signed at the bottom in blue ink. It explained the family's position on the matter of paternity in 3 measured paragraphs. He had typed it, he had printed it, he had brought it on official stationery, which meant he had planned all of this before my water broke. Bastian stood beside the door. He did not move. He did not speak. I counted the seconds in my head because I count things. 11 seconds. Julian shifted against my collarbone. I did not adjust him. I did not want to give my mother-in-law the satisfaction of watching me steady myself in any way. "Pack your things," Genevieve said again. "We've been generous." She pushed a craft envelope across the coffee table. It was thick. It was sealed with a small disc of red wax, the kind of envelope that has a number printed inside it. I would learn later that the number was £185,000, and the agreement was a 1-page proposal to dissolve the marriage in exchange for my full and forever withdrawal from the Harrington name and any future contact with the family. There were 2 signature lines. One was already initialed in Genevieve's hand. The other was waiting for mine. I did not argue. I did not cry. I reached into my handbag. I pulled out the manila envelope with the red lab tape. I handed it to my husband. "Read the underlined line, Bastian." He looked at me. He looked at the envelope. He looked at his mother for a quarter of a second, a tick, almost, and then he opened it. He read the line, page 1, paragraph 2. Paternal lineage confirmed. Patient Julian Hugh Thorne Harrington matches reference paternal sample Bastian B. Harrington. K null marker present in both. Probability of non-paternity, less than 1 inch 100 million. His face went pale. He read it again. He looked up. He did not look at me. He did not look at Julian. He turned his entire body slowly toward his mother, and he stared at her the way a son stares at a woman he has begun to suspect of a lie he is not yet ready to name. Mum, he said. That was the entire sentence. One syllable. He did not move closer to her. He did not move closer to me. He just stood there with the page in his hand and his mouth slightly open. And his father, who had been waiting for an answer or an apology or some kind of feminine collapse, finally saw something change in the room that he had not authorized. Bastian, Barnaby said. His voice was lower. It almost sounded uncertain. Whatever's in that envelope, son, the family's position remains. Dad, please. Genevieve stood. She straightened her cashmere cardigan with both hands, like a woman straightening a curtain. She walked past her husband. She walked past Bastian. She picked up her handbag from the credenza. She left through the front door without looking at me. She left her 3 packed suitcases where they were. Barnaby followed her 30 seconds later, slowly, with his memorandum still in his hand. He paused in the doorway. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't apologize. He nodded to Bastian in a way I had seen him nod at junior associates in the firm. Then he was gone. Bastian closed the door. He locked it. He turned the deadbolt twice, which he never did. He came back into the living room. He sat down on the floor in front of the coffee table. He put the envelope on his knees. He didn't say anything for a long time. Julian made the small, breathy sound newborns make when they are about to wake. I sat down on the sofa beside Bastian. I unbuckled the carrier strap one-handed. I lifted Julian out. I unwrapped his blanket. I held him against the front of my cardigan and pressed my chin to the top of his head. Rowena, I know. They had it all written down. I know. My father printed it on letterhead. I saw. He pressed the heels of his hands into his eyes for so long that I thought he might be crying. He wasn't exactly. He was containing something. He was a man who had grown up containing himself. Rowena, why was the line about, why is it underlined? Bastian, why does it matter that the lab match is so specific? It doesn't by itself. It just means I knew what your parents were going to do. I knew before they did it. I knew on Saturday. He went still. You knew on Saturday, he said. I requested the comparison on Saturday afternoon. Rosalind walked the request down herself. He closed his eyes. Why did you know? I did not answer that question. Not that night. I think now that he understood even then that I had answered it by handing him an envelope instead of a confession. He understood that I had needed paper to be louder than I was. The doorbell rang 20 minutes later. It was my mother standing on the front step with snow in her hair and a tote bag of food from a Gloucester cafe. She walked in. She set the bag down. She took Julian from my arms without asking, like a nurse who has done this 1,000 times because she has. She kissed the top of his head. She looked at Bastian sitting on the floor with the envelope on his knees. She looked at the 3 Harrington suitcases in the hallway. Mum's here, she said. That's all you need tonight. That sentence was, I think, the first time I cried. The first text message arrived at 2:13 inches the morning the next night. I was awake because Julian was awake. The screen lit up the dark nursery. The sender was Genevieve Harrington. The message was 4 words. Be reasonable. Take the offer. I read it twice. I did not reply to her. I forwarded it instead to Philippa Vance, a family law solicitor I had known through 3 years of records audits at her firm. Philippa was the kind of woman who answered her phone at 3:00 inches the morning if she liked you. And she liked me. I had texted her on Sunday afternoon before I knew what was coming. She had already, before her morning coffee on Monday, signed an engagement letter and started a privileged folder for me. By Tuesday morning, my message to her read, preserve everything. Group chat, email this text, use recorded delivery, and file the petition. The group chat is what they called the register. 16 people. Aunts, cousins, the older Harrington uncles, 2 Fitzroy cousins on Genevieve's side. Within hours of the ambush in my living room, Genevieve had begun a coordinated drip. She did not name me directly. She did not need to. She posted a cropped photograph of Julian's profile beside an old baby picture of Bastian at 1 month old. She labeled them simply, for peace of mind, family, we are looking into the situation. 4 of the 16 people in that chat texted me directly within the hour. None of them texted her. The rumor at the Wentworth Club arrived on Wednesday afternoon, hand-delivered by Genevieve's cousin Arabella Fitzroy at a charity tea I was not attending. The rumor concerned a man named Crispin Fairfax, who had been my supervisor at St. Jude's Royal for 6 years, before he retired to St. Ives 4 years ago with his husband Simon. Crispin was 68. He sent me Christmas cards from Cornwall with watercolor paintings of lobster pots on them. Genevieve had seen one of those cards once on our living room mantel. She had built a rumor out of a postcard from a man who lives with his husband in Cornwall. Bastian moved into the guest room of our townhouse the night after the ambush. He did not move out. He did not go to his parents. He did not go to a hotel. He moved into the small room across the hall from the nursery and pulled the door almost shut. He was, I think, neither choosing them nor choosing me. He was catching up. He was a 3-4-year-old man who had grown up inside a family that had never asked him a single question he could not answer with a polite handshake. And now his mother and his wife both wanted his answer to the same question, and he could not yet give one. He left a pillow on the guest room sofa, with a small smudge of my lipstick on it from a flu I had run in early 2022. He did not take the pillow back to our bedroom. He did not move it to the floor. He left it where it was. That somehow hurt more than the suitcases. If you've ever sat in your own house at 3:00 inches the morning holding your newborn while the family that was supposed to love you spent the same hours composing group texts about whether you belonged, I see you. I have nothing wise to say about it except this. The calm you feel in that hour is not numbness. It is a kind of attention. Stay in it. The rest of the story is being written while you sit there, and you are the only one paying close enough attention to read it correctly. On Tuesday, February 17th, Philippa Vance filed a declaratory judgment petition with the High Court Family Division sitting in London. The petition asked in plain language that the court enter a finding regarding Julian's paternity, given that the petitioner's in-laws had publicly and on firm letterhead alleged otherwise. Barnaby Harrington's signed memorandum became Exhibit A. The court accepted the filing at 8:42 inches the morning. Philippa called me at 9:00. They put it in writing on firm letterhead, she said. They handed us the petition's Exhibit A. Whoever did that for them is going to lose sleep tonight. The court issued a court order for disclosure to St. Jude's Private Healthcare for the relevant lineage section of Barnaby Harrington's October 2019 hereditary cancer screening file. The order was narrow. It asked only for haplogroup background data and chain of custody documentation. The court served notice to Barnaby the next morning at his office. Barnaby had 21 days to file an application to strike out. He talked to his cousin Montague Sterling, a senior partner at the firm who had been at our wedding and had once, in a moment of unsteady kindness, told me Genevieve had a way of managing the men in the family. Montague advised against the application to strike out. Barney, he said, on a recorded office line that would later be subpoenaed by no one because nothing in this story required force. If we strike out, the Inns of Court will be talking about this by Friday. Let it run. The lab will confirm what we already know. Barnaby signed the non-challenge election that same afternoon. He told Genevieve about it over dinner. She did not eat the rest of her meal. I learned all of this in retrospect. At the time, I learned only what Philippa told me, which was that the order had been sent, the notice had been received, and the window was open. 21 days passed. In those 21 days, Julian rolled over for the first time on the playmat under the nursery window. He smiled for what felt like a smile and not gas on day 15. My mother stayed with me for 3 weeks, slept on the sofa in the living room, made stews for the freezer, and washed bottles in the sink with the same brisk efficiency she had once brought to her hospital wing. Bastian came to the townhouse twice a week and held Julian for an hour at a time. He did not stay overnight. He did not ask me about the envelope. He did not ask me about the petition. He asked his son once in a whisper, "I'm sorry, mate. I don't know what's happening yet." I heard him through the wall. I did not say anything to him. I went back to my room. His father called him once during those weeks. Bastian told me later the only thing his father said was, "Are you all right, son?" Bastian told me he had answered, "I don't know yet, Dad." That was the whole conversation. On day 21, Sunday, March 22nd, the challenge window closed without a filing. On Monday morning, March 23rd, St. Jude's Private Healthcare's compliance team released the requested portion of Barnaby Harrington's 2019 hereditary cancer file to Dr. Rosalind Sterling under the court's authority. Sterling called me at 11:14 inches the morning. "They released it," she said. "I should have results by Friday." Friday felt like a long way away. I want to pause here and ask you one small thing. If you've ever waited for a piece of paper to confirm something you already knew in your bones, you understand what those 4 days felt like. Stay with me to the end of this story. I want to hear in the comments the name of the city where you're listening from tonight. I read them. I keep a small list. The next part of the story is the part where the room I had been told to leave became the room I was being invited back into on purpose by the woman who had told me to pack and get out. While I was waiting for Sterling's letter, Genevieve was planning a brunch. She announced it by email to the family on the second to last weekend in March, the same weekend Barnaby's order window had finally closed. She titled the email, "For the Family's Peace of Mind." The brunch was set for Sunday, April 12th at 11:00 the morning at the Harrington Estate in Ascot. Reverend Crispin Cavendish of Holy Trinity Church, Sloane Square, would say a small word. 24 guests, the Fitzroy cousins, the senior Harrington uncles, 2 senior partners from the firm, Montague Sterling and Alaric Bletchley. Tarquin and Cressida, who had no idea what was about to happen, Barnaby, Genevieve, Bastian, and me. Genevieve was choosing the date for renewal. Easter Sunday fell on April 5th. A naming brunch the following Sunday placed the event safely outside of Lent and inside the symbolism she liked best. She had ordered the invitations on heavy ivory cardstock with the Harrington crest embossed at the top in dull gold leaf. She had ordered them, I would later learn, before the order was even released. She had ordered them in confidence. She had ordered the cards before she'd ordered the truth. That was her mistake. Philippa told me later that the brunch was a gift. She invited the room you needed, she said over the phone. All you have to do is sit in it. I believed her. I told Philippa I would be there. I told her I would bring her with me. I told her I would bring everything. I replied to Genevieve's email at 11:47 on Saturday night, March 28th. The same night, Philippa locked the original signed letter into safe number 53 at her office. My reply was 4 words long. I'll be there. Both of us. Genevieve read it as me and the baby. I had meant something else. Sterling called me at 1:00 the afternoon on Friday, March 27th. Her voice was the voice of a woman who had read a report twice and called twice through the steps to make sure she had not misread it. "Rowena," she said, "are you sure you want this in writing?" "Twice, with your signature on letterhead. I'll have it for you by Monday." I asked her to seal it in the same envelope I had carried home from the maternity ward. She said she would. When I picked it up on Monday afternoon, March 30th, I added 2 more pages to the envelope, a copy of the court order, certified by the High Court clerk, and a copy of the chain of custody log street Jude's private healthcare had attached to its release. I numbered the 3 pages in pencil at the top corners. I drew a small underline in yellow highlighter across the relevant line on page 2. I sealed the envelope. I labeled it in my own handwriting for Bastian in order. I set it on the rocking chair in Julian's nursery on the night of Saturday, April 11th. I clipped a sticky note to the front of it. The note read, "Read all 3 pages in order." Julian was asleep in his cot. The lamp-shaped nightlight cast its slow, soft circle on the wall. I sat in the kitchen with a cup of cold tea and waited for my husband to come home from wherever it was he'd been driving in the dark. He came in at 10:42. He took off his coat. He walked down the hallway. He stood in the doorway of the nursery for a long time, the way a man stands in the doorway of a room he has only recently begun to understand he is allowed to enter. He picked up the envelope from the rocker. He read page 1. The same page I had handed him at the ambush almost 2 months earlier. The page he had been carrying in his briefcase ever since. Like a man carrying a stone he did not yet have the strength to put down. He turned to page 2. He read the underlined line. He read it twice. He closed the envelope very slowly. He did not look at me. He did not look at Julian. He looked down the hallway toward the guest room where his mother had been sitting since 5:00 that afternoon because he had invited her to come over and help him set up coffee for the next morning's brunch. "When did she get here, Rowena?" 5. She brought a tin of shortbread from Sunningdale Patisserie and a single Holy Trinity Church lily. He stood up. He did not slam the envelope shut. He did not raise his voice. He carried it down the hallway the way a man carries a verdict. I stood in the nursery doorway and held Julian against my chest and watched a strip of yellow light under his mother's closed door. Behind that door, my husband said something I did not hear. Genevieve said, "Bastian Ashbury, you don't understand what you're holding." Bastian Ashbury was a name his mother used. She had used it his whole life. She had used the maiden name of her own grandmother as his middle name because that grandmother had been her favorite and she had used it instead of Bennett, the Harrington family name that Barnaby had given Bastian at birth because Genevieve had quietly resented her husband's family for 34 years. Bastian's voice came back through the door. It was low and clear and it carried. "My name is Bastian Bennett Harrington," he said. "It always has been." She did not answer. I do not know what her face looked like in that moment. I only know that when Bastian came out of the guest room, he was holding the envelope in one hand and a soft pillow in the other, and he walked past me to our bedroom, and he set the pillow down on his side of our bed for the first time in 7.5 weeks. He did not say goodnight. He did not need to. He had asked the question. She had not answered. And by morning, the entire family was going to hear what she had refused to say. The Harrington estate sits behind a low brick wall on a quiet street in Ascot that has not changed in 100 years. The driveway is bluestone. The front door is painted black. The dining room can seat 24 comfortably and 28 if you bring out the second sideboard. On the morning of Sunday, April 12th, it was already set when we arrived at 5 minutes before 11:00. White hydrangeas in low glass bowls, linen napkins, a leather-bound book open on the console table in the front hall with a Mont Blanc fountain pen lying beside it. The page was blank. It was the page Genevieve had opened for the entry she intended to deny. She had not yet drawn the line through Julian's name. She had been waiting until I arrived to do that part publicly. I carried Julian in a soft sling against my chest. Bastian walked beside me with a small leather satchel. Inside the satchel was the envelope, the same one I had carried home from St. Jude's Royal. Behind us, Philippa Vance walked through the front door in a navy blue suit and a string of pearls. 2 of the Fitzroy cousins glanced at her. Montague Sterling looked up from across the room. Alaric Bletchley set his coffee cup down. Philippa nodded at me. She moved to the back wall of the dining room. She did not speak. Her presence alone changed the air in the house from family meeting to deposition. Barnaby stood at the head of the dining table at 12:08 the afternoon. He had a printed page in his hand. The page was on Harrington, Bletchley, and Sterling, firm letterhead. He cleared his throat. The conversation around the table fell quiet. "It is the position of this family," he said, "that until questions of paternity are resolved, the Harrington name will not be extended to this child." He said, "This child, not my grandson." That was the sentence I knew I would never forgive. Genevieve reached across the table. She slid the Kraft envelope toward me. I had not seen the Kraft envelope since the day of the ambush. She had been carrying it. She slid it the last few inches with the back of her hand, as if it disgusted her to touch it for any longer than necessary. "This is the offer," she said. "It is generous. Take the morning to think about it." I did not pick it up. I slid it back across the table toward her. "I came with a different envelope," I said. "Bastian will read it." The table got very quiet, the way a courtroom gets quiet just before the clerk reads the verdict. Bastian took the manila envelope out of his satchel. He set it flat on the table. He opened it. He removed 3 numbered pages. He set them in order. He did not stand. He read sitting down, the way a man reads when he wants to make sure he will not lose his composure halfway through. "Page 1, he said. "St. Jude's Royal Hospital, Department of Genetics. Signed Dr. Rosalind Sterling. Patient Julian Hugh Thorne Harrington. K null antigen present. Paternal lineage confirmed. Patient Bastian B. Harrington matches reference paternal sample. Probability of non-paternity less than 1 in 100 million. He looked up. He looked at his father. "My son is my son. The hospital confirmed it 5 weeks ago. I have known since the day Rowena handed me this envelope. I just hadn't read all of it yet." Montague Sterling sat up a little straighter. Alaric Bletchley folded his hands on the table. Bastian did not stop. "Page 2. He paused. He drew a quiet breath. "St. Jude's Royal Hospital. Department of Genetics. Signed, Dr. Rosalind Sterling. Patient Bastian B. Harrington. Paternal haplogroup incompatible with reference profile of Barnaby H. Harrington. St. Jude's Private Healthcare Hereditary Cancer Panel, October 2019. Released to St. Jude's Royal by court order, the 23rd of March 2026. Maternal lineage confirmed." He set the page down. He looked at his mother. Not at his father. Not at me. Not at Julian. Asleep against my chest. He looked at the woman who had told me to pack my things and get out of her family home. "It says very clearly that I am my mother's son. It says very clearly that I am not yours, Dad." There were 9 seconds of silence. I counted them. I had counted 11 the day they told me to pack. Genevieve stood up too quickly. Her chair scraped the rug. Her water glass, half a Bloody Mary in a stemmed crystal tumbler, tipped on its side and went over the front edge of the table and onto the open page of the Harrington Family Register. where the next entry had been waiting to be written and unwritten. The tomato red liquid soaked into the heavy paper and into the soft red leather of the binding. The page stained immediately. Genevieve did not move to wipe it. Nobody moved to wipe it. "Bastian," she said. Her voice broke for the first time anyone in that room had ever heard. "That lab is wrong. That lab is wrong." Barnaby did not look at her. He looked at the page on the table in front of his son. He looked at Montague. He looked at Alaric. He looked at the book on the console table behind his wife. Then he turned to her and he said the only thing he said for the entire afternoon. "Genevieve," he said, "is this real?" She did not answer. Bastian picked up the third page. Page 3 is the court order from the High Court Family Division, the 23rd of March 2026. Street Jude's Private Healthcare released this file under judicial authority. My father chose not to challenge the order. He told his own solicitor he had nothing to hide. He was right about himself. He was wrong about someone else in this room. He set the page down. My solicitor is in the back of the room. If anyone here would like to challenge the chain of custody, you may speak to Philippa Vance tomorrow morning. Her contact information is on the bottom of page 3. No one spoke. No one wanted Philippa's number. Reverend Crispin Cavendish closed the small Bible he had been holding in his lap. He did not stand. He did not deliver his small word. He folded his hands on top of his Bible and he waited the way a man waits at the side of a hospital bed. Barnaby asked his question one more time. "Genevieve," he said very softly now, "is this real?" She still did not answer. I stood. I adjusted Julian against my collarbone. I clipped the carrier strap with one hand. I did not look at my mother-in-law. I did not look at the craft envelope. I did not look at the stained page in the open book in the hallway. I walked out of the dining room. Bastian followed me. He carried the manila envelope under his arm. Philippa held the front door open for both of us, and we walked down the bluestone steps into the cold April light, and behind us the entire room sat in a silence none of them would ever forget. The first week after the brunch is the part of the story I have the hardest time telling because nothing dramatic happened. Genevieve stayed in the Ascot estate. Barnaby moved one of the dining room chairs to the opposite end of the long table without explanation. He took his evening meals there. She took hers at the original head. They did not speak across the length of the table. They did not divorce. On Wednesday, April 15th, Montague Sterling and Alaric Bletchley called Barnaby into the Mayfair office. They did not fire him. They invoked a personal integrity clause Barnaby himself had written into the partnership agreement back in 2007. The clause did not strip his title. It stripped his veto rights on partnership track promotions and major firm matters. They invoked it quietly. There was no announcement to the London Law Society, no press release, just a one-line revision to the partnership minutes that anyone could read if they ever happened to look. Bastian, on his own initiative, walked into the senior partner's office the next morning and pulled himself off the partnership track entirely. He had been a junior partner for 2 years and 3 months. He emptied his Mayfair office on a Saturday. He kept the brass plaque from his door, the one that read Bastian E. Harrington, partner, and put it into a cardboard box in our garage. He told me later that he kept it because one day Julian would ask, and he wanted to be able to tell his son what the name had cost. He opened a small family law practice in Richmond 2 weeks later. Philippa Vance agreed to be of counsel. They share a receptionist now. Genevieve wrote 5 letters in the second week after the brunch. She wrote them by hand on her own monogrammed Tiffany blue stationery in her left-leaning script. She sent one to the Surrey Horticultural Society. She sent one to the Holy Trinity Church Vestry. She sent one to the Ladies' Committee at the Wentworth Club. She sent one to a university alumni board she had chaired for 15 years. She sent one to the Historical Preservation Committee in Belgravia. Each letter said the same thing. For personal reasons, I withdraw from active participation. Please consider this my resignation, effective immediately. No one had told her to write those letters. No one had asked her to. She wrote them, sealed them, and walked them to the post office on the high street herself. 5 envelopes, 5 resignations. That, I realized, was its own kind of confession. On the first Tuesday of April that did not feel like an emergency, which was April 21st, 9 days after the brunch, Barnaby Harrington drove himself to our townhouse in Richmond. He came alone. He parked at the curb. He walked up the front steps with a leather satchel in one hand and a small cardboard box in the other. I opened the door. I did not invite him in. He did not ask to be invited in. He stood on the front step and waited. "Rowena," he said. May I sit at your kitchen table for 10 minutes? I held the door open. He came inside. He set the satchel and the box on the kitchen table. He took off his coat. He folded it over the back of the chair. He sat down. Bastian came into the kitchen. Barnaby did not stand for his son. He nodded once. Bastian nodded back. They had not spoken since the brunch. They did not speak now. Barnaby opened the box first. Inside was the Harrington family register. The cover was still stained where the Bloody Mary had soaked through. He had cleaned it as much as it could be cleaned, but the page where Julian's name had been meant to go was still buckled in red along the bottom edge. He took the Mont Blanc fountain pen out of his satchel. He set it on the table. Write his name first, he said. The others were entered by blood. He's the only one in this book entered by choice, by mine and by yours. That's the only kind of legacy worth signing. I did not answer right away. I looked at the book. I looked at the pen. I looked at the man on the other side of my kitchen table who had stood in my living room 2 months earlier and called my son a bastard. Barnaby, I said, I am not writing in that book to keep your family alive. I am writing to put my son's name in a place that lied about him. He nodded. That is the only reason to write in it. I uncapped the pen. I wrote in clear blue ink on the page that had been waiting for 2 months. Julian Hugh Thorne Harrington, born the 12th of February 2026, Street, Jude's Royal Hospital, London. Mother, Rowena Thorne. Father, I know, and I capped the pen. I set it down. Barnaby did not touch the book. He did not write under what I had written. He did not initial it. He looked at the page for a long time. Then he laid his open hand flat over the writing, the way a man lays a hand on a forehead in a hospital, and he held it there for a few seconds and then took it back. Thank you, he said. He did not stay for coffee. He stood. He put on his coat. He left the register on the kitchen table. He drove away. He never asked me about Genevieve. I never asked him back. Genevieve called the townhouse 2 weeks after the brunch on a Tuesday afternoon. She did not email. She did not write on her Tiffany blue stationery. She used the telephone like a woman who is being asked for the first time in her life to use her actual voice instead of an embossed letterhead. I picked up the kitchen phone with one hand. Julian was on my hip. I let her wait through one breath of silence before I spoke. Hello, Genevieve. Rowena, she said. I would like to meet him. I do not require you to forgive me to do it. It was the first sentence she had ever said to me that did not contain the word we. I did not say yes. I did not say no. I said, I will call you back on Friday. I called her back on Friday. I told her our terms. The terms were 6 lines long. They were typed on a single sheet of paper and printed twice, 1 copy for her and 1 copy for our file. The terms read as follows. 1. You may see Julian once per month in a neutral public space with Rowena or Bastian present. 2. The word bloodline may not be used in any room in which Julian is also present. 3. The Harrington family register may not be mentioned, opened, displayed, or referenced in Julian's hearing. 4. Barnaby may not be present at these visits without prior written approval from Rowena and Bastian. 5. Any breach of the above terms ends the arrangement immediately, with no further explanation owed. 6. You may be in his life. You may not define it. She signed the bottom of her copy in front of me at a coffee shop in Twickenham with a black pen she pulled from her own handbag. She signed her full name, Genevieve Ashbury Harrington. I had never seen her middle name written out before. I did not ask about it. Some names belong only to the people who carry them. I think she had been carrying that one along for a very long time. She held Julian for 11 minutes that morning. He fell asleep against her shoulder. She did not cry. She did not apologize. She held him steady the way a woman holds a thing she finally understands she is borrowing, not owning. When the 11 minutes were up, I took him back. She nodded. She left first. She did not look at me on her way out. We have met once a month since then. Sometimes I think she will say something true. So far she has not. But she has also not used the word bloodline once. That in some families is what an apology looks like. On the last Friday of April 2026, the last day of the month, the last day of this story, my mother drove down from Gloucester with 2 bags of groceries and a casserole dish that she insisted on baking in our oven, so the townhouse would smell like a real house again. She'd been with us on and off for most of the 11 weeks since the discharge. She'd washed bottles. She'd folded blankets. She had sat in the rocking chair in the nursery at 2:00 the morning and sung the lullabies my father had taught her in a low alto voice that was older than the lamb-shaped nightlight. That evening, Bastian came home from his small Richmond office at 6:00. He kissed the top of my head. He kissed the top of Julian's head. He stood at the kitchen counter and washed his hands. "Rowena," he said. I framed the bracelet. I looked up. He held out a small wooden frame. Inside it was the hospital bracelet from February 12th. The one that read in tidy printed capitals, Baby Thorn Harrington. He had mounted it on cream paper. He had set the mounting straight. He hung it that night with a small picture hanging hook on the wall of the nursery. Next to the framed black and white ultrasound from week 12 that I had kept in my purse for most of my pregnancy. The bracelet has Thorn first. I had not asked him to mount it that way. He had just done it. After Julian was asleep, after my mother had gone to bed in the guest room, after Bastian had made me a cup of decaf tea and set it on my bedside table and gone to brush his teeth, I stood alone in the doorway of the nursery and looked at the framed bracelet under the soft circle of the lamp-shaped nightlight. They wanted a child who deserved their name. I gave my son a name that already had a mother in it, and a grandfather who finally chose his own. That in the end is the only legacy I ever wanted to leave him. I want to say one last thing, and then I will let you go. There is a thing that happens in families like the Harringtons. They build a book. They build a name. They build a story about themselves that they tell every Christmas and every Boxing Day and every wedding and every christening. And the story is so old and so polished that the people inside it stop noticing where the seams are. And then a child is born and the seams crack. And the family panics because the child has done nothing except exist. And the existence of the child has revealed the seams that the family has been hiding from itself for 34 years. When that happens, the family will try to push the child out. They will use words like blood and name and legacy. They will print memorandums on letterhead. They will pack your suitcases. They will smile at you with pure disgust. It is not because the child does not belong. It is because the child is the first honest thing they have looked at in a long time. If you are listening to this tonight from a city I have never been to, in a house that may not yet feel like your house, with a child or a husband or a mother or a quiet phone in your hand, leave the name of your city in the comments. I read every one. I am not promising you a miracle. I am promising you a stranger who knows that a calm woman is the most dangerous thing in the room. And if this story stayed with you, do one thing for me before you close your phone. Tell another mother she belongs. That is the only legacy that matters. I am Rowena Thorn. I am 32 years old. My son is Julian Hugh Thorn Harrington. He was born on a Thursday in February in the city of London. He sleeps tonight in a nursery in Richmond under a small lamp-shaped lamp on the other side of a doorway where a hospital bracelet hangs in a quiet frame on a cream-colored wall. He belongs. He always did. And so do you.